Mr. Rooney, how did you become a foreign correspondent?
I was so lucky. I was with the 17th Field Artillery, and I became their correspondent. And I went into London, and I went to the Stars and Stripes office. They were just moving from Ireland into London, the London Times building. And they needed reporters, and I said I was one, which I wasn't. For instance, I worked for the Stars and Stripes, which was read, had a couple of million circulation, huge. And everybody in the Army read it. And it was of vital importance to say some sergeant was from Beloit, Illinois, or Wisconsin, wherever it is, because they cared more about that if the person was from their city. It was vitally important to say where somebody was from. I learned that from a couple of good reporters who were editors of the Stars and Stripes. You always got the name of the hometown. It was a good first start for me. My stuff got sent back to the United States. It was everywhere. It was great. I wrote my stories, and a lot of them appeared in the United States. They were written for the Stars and Stripes in Europe, but they appeared all over the country. They would let us know that there was going to be a raid, and Homer Biggert, Great Herald Tribune, Gladwin Hill, New York Times, and Walter Cronkite, and I would get on a train. We'd go out to the First Army headquarters, and they'd take us to different bases, and we'd each do a story from one of the bases. And then we'd get together and come back into London and write our stories and have them published the next day. It was great. We had a great little bar next to the Stars and Stripes off Fleet Street in London, and all the correspondents from the AP, the UP, and the Times and the Tribune came over there for a drink at night, and we always went down there. And there were always 8 or 10 of us telling stories. It was a great spot. It was called The Lamb and the Lark. Only time I really met Hemingway was going into Paris, and I was in the long line of American troops, artillery mostly, and I had a Jeep, my own Jeep, and Hemingway was in the line. They shot at the front of our line, and the whole thing stopped while they went to get whoever it was shooting at us, and I ran over to the side to get out of a fire, and I go over behind some hedges, and there's Ernest Hemingway. I thought, my God, here I am behind a bush with Ernest Hemingway. Here I was, a 25-year-old reporter. I was pretty impressed. Oh, I was scared every day, because as we came into the beaches and fought our way forward, the Germans were ahead of us all the time. And there was never a day when you could not have been killed. And yes, I was frightened to death. I think everybody was. We had a correspondence camp, and there were with the First Army, and there were 25 of us, or 28, something like that. I'm not sure the number. And each day we would go with a different division, and sometimes a couple of us went with one division, but we went alone too, and we didn't gang up much. In other words, there were never 4 or 5 of us with one division, and as the division pushed forwards against the German forces, we moved with them, and it was always dangerous. And yeah, I was scared. Well, I saw a lot of bodies. I had been in England with the 8th Air Force for a year, and I flew with the 8th Air Force on bombing raids into Germany. I went on one flight, and then one of the people on board my plane was killed. So I had seen people killed before, and I seen a lot of people killed in the Air Force, and I always went out to the airfields when the 8th Air Force came back, and there were frequently people on board who had been shot. The FW-190s and Mr. Smith 109 shot through the ranks of our B-17 bombers, firing, and often killed some guys. And I think it's important for reporters to actually be everywhere so they can see for themselves what things are really like. I mean, that's the best way to be a reporter, is to tell what you're seeing. I think being a reporter is one of the best jobs in the world. And if you were covering a war, going to the front is where you go to get the story. Well, I don't know how quiet it was kept. They knew we were coming. The beach was down there, and they were up on the banks with guns, and it was wow.
I came into Utah Beach 4 days after the first assault waves. There are no pictures of the landing, you know. You've seen the few there are 1,000 times. All my pictures are in my memory. The dead had been laid out in rows, covered by blankets, their GI boots sticking out. I remember their boots, all so much the same, on boys, all so different. No one can tell the whole story of D-Day because no one knows it. Each of the 60,000 men who waded ashore that day knew a little of the story too well. To them, the landing looked like a catastrophe. Each knew a friend shot through the throat, shot through the knee. Each knew the names of 5 hanging dead on the barbed wire in the water 20 yards offshore. They knew 3 who lay unattended on the stony beach as the blood drained from holes in their bodies. They saw whole tank crews drown when they rumbled off the ramps of their landing craft and dropped into 20 feet of water. There were heroes here no one will ever know because they are dead. The heroism of others is known only to themselves.
Was the most shocking moment, though, when you walked into that concentration camp?
Well, it was because I had heard about it for years, by then a couple of years, and I was shocked at how true everything was. I mean, there were still people there who were dying and who were prisoners, and they were in desperate condition. And it was a shock to me to find that it was true. No, nothing's too gruesome to tell. Proud to say I have always hated the idea of war, thought it was totally unnecessary and foolish, and I still think so. I mean, there is no reason why men have to end up trying to kill each other to make a point. It's ridiculous. Well, I do think it would be very difficult to cover a war now. It's not the same. One guy does not shoot another anymore, I don't think, in a war.